I don't
All
think we'll
right.
hit that limit.
All right, so we're hanging out. Thought we'd do a casual episode of Golf in the Life of. We're just hanging out with a couple guys, just talking, and we're going to kick it off with a not too controversial subject. Nick has declined to comment on this, but Brian and Andrew are happy to. So, guys, Tiger and Chris is a hot topic now. What are your thoughts, Brian? You've said some stuff in the groups, but let's hear what you have to say.
Well, first, being a teacher, right, and thinking that there is some clue to how tour players pick teachers, that it's not just like, they take a dart and just throw it at the wall and whatever name it hits, that's who they call on the phone. I think it was pretty smart of Noda and Tiger, because apparently Noda had something to do with the selection process, to pick somebody who is experienced teaching, a golf pro on tour who may have had similar swing issues as Tiger, away from certain things and toward other things. So I think they made a brilliant pick. The second thing I think about the whole thing is that more than anything else should show people that the same 20 people that the golf media is sort of, advertised or popularized or tried to keep in popularity for a long time, that era is over. And especially if this little situation goes good, there's a new wave of people like Andrew here and Chris and even a couple of old guys that maybe everybody hadn't heard of, like me, that maybe have not only different ideas for tour players, besides all this positional, so-called modern swing stuff that's really been sort of a failure, you couldn't say any other way, and also some solutions for regular golfers down the road. And I think the golf public is probably pulling for Chris and Tiger.
Who you said that he had experience doing with someone similar? Who are you referring to there?
Well, Jamie Lovemark used to work with Sean Foley, and Aaron Badley has been known to launch the ball a little low with the driver. I mean, I think it's if you're gonna pick somebody, I'll give you a for instance to kind of take it off of Chris, but try to make my point. When I found out that Sean Foley apparently sent Luke Donald to Chuck Cook, I thought that was a bad pick. Not because Sean doesn't know what he's doing. Obviously, the track record says he does. Not that Chuck isn't a very good teacher, because the track record says he is, but because the swing that Luke Donald made when Luke Donald played his best was drastically different than the swing that Chuck Cook teaches. So it just doesn't seem to me that if you were trying to, and I apologize for the phone in the background, if you were trying to find a player, a teacher, right? So apparently that's what Noda was entrusted with, that if you were looking for somebody for Zach Johnson, because for whatever reason he decided to go away from Mike Bender, Chuck Cook might be a really good pick, but Chuck Cook probably wouldn't be a very good pick for Bubba Watson or somebody else who swings drastically different that he's noted for teaching. So I think in this respect, since Chris is not really a method teacher, you're talking about Tiger maybe hoping to be able to, potentially just do some stuff maybe the way he used to do it. And I think that, I have no idea what they're going to work on, nor is it any of my business, but I think it makes sense as a choice.
All right, sounds good. Andrew, do you have any comments? You're friends with Chris. You sent out some tweets about it.
Yeah, Cordy, I think similar to Brian, I think it's a fantastic choice. We all know Chris. I think all of us count Chris as a friend. He's always been somebody that I can call if I've got a question. The thing that struck me about Chris is, he could be the smartest golf instructor I know, but the thing that impressed me most when I got to know Chris better was his ability to not get distracted with minutia and the science of it. He's great at being able to say, look, we want results out of this. Forget about all the little stuff. How can we get results? And he's so good at that. He always strikes me as having a lot of wisdom. And I think when you look at what Tiger needs wisdom. He doesn't need more science. He needs guidance, and he needs sound advice, I think, as to how to get back to where he needs to be in order to play his best. I like what Brian said. Chris isn't a method guy. He's not going to try to get him to do anything to fit a certain mold. He's going to allow Tiger to get a swing, to build that swing that's going to allow him to be most successful. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what comes of it. And I know there's a lot of people who are big Tiger fans out there. I've never been a huge Tiger fan, but now really I think I am. I've got a reason to really root for Tiger, and in the back, hoping that Chris does great.
No, that's good. So my question here is, you mentioned the science versus the guidance aspect, right?
Yeah.
And so where are we with that? Because I in my mind, when I hear it, the Tiger's going to be looking for like that science element, and you said that he'd be looking more for the guidance element. So
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. It's all well and good to know exactly, to understand what you need to do, but how do you communicate that, and how do you present that in the big picture from that global perspective? How do you get Tiger to go, okay, this is what I need to focus on in order to play better. This is how I need to practice in order to play better. As Brian said, I have no idea what Chris is gonna share with Tiger and how they're gonna work together. Nor do I propose to know, but I do suspect that the thing that's going to come into play is Chris is not somebody who's going to start to really get into biomechanics, and that just because he understands that better than most. He's going to be able to take that information, and to me, wisdom in teaching, and this is really the art of teaching, is being able to have the knowledge, when to share the knowledge in the right way with the right student at the right time. And that's what Chris really brings to the table, in my opinion.
Hey, Brian, you have an opposing comment.
The basic thesis of what Andrew says, I agree with. I would say I would think there are people who are members of the Facebook groups that we participate in who, because there's a few non-golf pros on there, that just casual observers that know more and have been exposed to more of the modern science of golf instruction than Tiger Woods ever has. I don't think he's ever heard of going normal or beta torque or even been like, I just don't think he got any of it. I think he was getting something very different early on with Sean than I would have ever in a million years taught him, learning from the scientists that I've learned. It just seemed like to be going in the opposite direction. I think what Tiger got was, and I like Sean and I consider him a friend, but it was a little bit, it sounded a little golfing machine-y, he was compressing the ball better and all this kind of stuff. I just don't think he can do a one paragraph, what have we learned about the golf swing from golf science? And you don't have to get any of the terms right. Heck, half the time I use my own made-up terms. I just don't think Tiger's ever been exposed to any of the science. And I'm not saying because Sean doesn't know it. I'm just saying he didn't teach him any of it. And I think that kind of questions come up a couple of times. Like I don't know which forum it was on, Nick, but somebody said, what's the difference between Sean Foley and Chris Como? Sounds like when you read the media reports, they're the same guy. This little young guy, studied with a bunch of people, kind of hip, and they know. So I said, look, here's the difference. They know different stuff. They like different stuff. They teach different stuff, and they teach the different stuff that they teach differently. Other than that, they're exactly the same. I mean, I just don't. I've even seen some media reports saying the reason they think they picked Chris is because Chris is just like Sean, and he's not going to have to make another change. And I love to make up terms all the time, and I made up a term. This is an overhaul. This is an underhaul. Tiger needs to be taught out of a lot of the stuff that he's been taught the last few years, because underneath all of that was the guy that won 4 majors in a row. Here's the dirty little secret. He wasn't doing what Butch wanted him to do when he won those 4 majors in a row. Does anybody really think that? I mean, he would have never left Butch. That was just an accident. That was the swing he grew up with those other 2 teachers who somehow been left out of this, Rudy Duran and John Anselmo. They had a lot to do with Tiger. And then a little bit of Butch, and then you got 2000 Tiger, and there's Terry Rose taking Bangkok pictures, right? I think that any teacher worth their salt could fix Tiger. I think he picked the right guy. And to think that golf science has already been pushed to somebody like Tiger, I just think is just not the case at all. I'm not saying Chris is going to say, oh, let me explain to you some real technical thing I learned from Dr. Kwan. No. Chris is going to do exactly like Andrew says. He's going to use the wisdom of teaching experience, especially on tour, to know what not to say and just to say enough, because all you got to do is push the right buttons with this guy. He won 5 tournaments doing something that looked uncomfortable for him. So I think that nobody out there knows what golf science is. Brandel Chambly thinks golf science is X, and he's about to find out it ain't Y, it's Q. And hopefully, if nothing else happens from all of this except for Chris being successful and Tiger being successful, is people learn what real golf science is, because it ain't anything that Tiger's been exposed to, my opinion.
What's real golf science?
Well, I mean, a simple definition would be, if you just look at what we've learned. We've learned that dragging the handle forever, that club isn't going to line itself up. That's one thing we've learned. We've learned that there are torques that you have to apply to the club while you're forcing your hands along some path, and there's a best way to do that. And now, if you do all of that, then all the force is going to be coming this way at impact. You got whole methodologies based on putting force across the shaft through the ball. And I know it because I taught that stuff. And that stuff, that's the last thing in the world, I think, in my opinion, I have no way of knowing. Chris Como is going to tell Tiger, oh, by the way, put some force across that shaft, Tiger, so you can deal off that driver down the 3 and 3s and aim 400 degrees left because you're making a divot down to China. That ain't going to happen. It's not that complicated. Knowing that the world is where we are and the sun, and we're revolving around the sun instead of the other way around, isn't that difficult. It's just different. And I think what Tiger's going to dig is that real science applied to the golf swing makes things easier. When you're fighting science, it's a hard battle.
Good stuff. Hey, Nick, you're muted there. If you want to mute yourself. You've got to have some comments after that sermon. Nick. Oh, well. All right. No, that's good stuff. Andrew, I mean, do you agree with that? Or so you guys both probably fall on the science end. So then we got the 2 kinds of trends, right? We got science over here, and we've got mindset and all that stuff over here. You guys probably fall a little bit more over here on the science side.
Cordy, I figured out how to unmute myself.
Good job.
And I think that Chris's approach is characterized as evidence-based coaching. So you know the science, and that informs what you say to your player. And there's probably going to be times where Tiger asks Chris to give him a lot of technical stuff, and he may not even give it to him if he doesn't think that it fits in with the overall coaching plan. So I think a lot of misconceptions are going to be blown out in the next year of what people think a teacher does who has studied biomechanics. And I think based on a lot of people thinking that Sean Foley had a biomechanical approach, I think that's evidence that people have a lot of confusion over really what that means, because I think he had more, as Brian would say, he had more influence of the golf machine, more ad stack and tilt side, and he's pretty open about being heavily influenced by Andy Plummer, and so the stack and tilt crowd was kind of claiming Tiger as showing a lot of elements of that early on. And I think a lot of the press says, okay, that's what biomechanics is in golf. It's being really into positions and mechanics. And I have a lot of love for golf and machine guys and stack and tilt guys and more ad guys, so I'm not trying to rip their school of thought. I would expect to see more clarity as to what a teacher coaches who understands what Chris knows, and that it's not like regular people when they see biomechanics, they think, oh, there's guys who are mechanical, and then these bio even further, and they treat you like a robot, and they're even more into positions. Well, that's not what I've seen from any of the instructors who have taken it upon themselves to really learn that information. And I think I've taken a lesson from Brian. There was nothing technical, mechanical involved in what he was trying to teach me versus other instruction that I've had in the past that was, I think old school instruction is much more position based and mechanical than biomechanically based instruction is going to show itself to be now.
Let's define that real quick. What is, yeah, Brian?
Okay, just being a little older than Nick and being in the business, he's right, but I just want to, so old school teaching, that's like Henry Picard giving Ben Hogan a lesson. Those guys were like most old school parents, right? The teacher is like the parent. How much information do I give the kid? They had no Dr. Spock. They had no modern, the modern science or learning science, all that stuff. They just had common sense. So the old school teachers had no video. They had no faux science textbooks. They had nothing. They just saw the ball. They played golf. Most of them, were really good players who taught, and that was old school teaching. And you had the modern era of teaching, right, which started with the video camera when that became available in, let's say, 1985 up to, let's say, 2010. That's the modern era. Some 3D, some pseudoscience, some stuff like that. Then now we're in the postmodern era. You have Andrew Rice actually trying to figure out, how does a tour player hit this little damn wedge shot that looks so mysterious? Let's try to figure out exactly what's going on. And then finding these real scientists, these Young Hoo Kwans and Sasho McKenzie's and Stephen Nesbitt's, and synthesizing this information. So like you said, Nick, I'm 100% in agreement. Chris is now the parent, the informed parent, with all the real science on how little kids grow up to be, well-rounded people. And he's gonna dole out the information just like Andrew's gonna dole it out to his kids when they say, where babies come from in 3 years, right? He's gonna give them a little different answer than he's gonna give them in 15 years. And I think Chris is gonna follow a similar approach.
So I want to get back to biomechanics because we've been talking about that, right? And that's something that Chris is going to be using. What does it mean to you guys, like in the sense of your coaching? And then where does it fit in? Is it a foundational element? Is it just a piece of the puzzle? Like, what is it to you? Go for it, Andrew. Let's hear it.
How somebody uses the ground, how someone generates force, how someone swings the club. You would have to say that's foundational. But I taught a lesson earlier today where I've got a player who is struggling with trying to be too perfect, and he's really trying to get everything right. All I said to him was, I said, he's in town for this Thanksgiving week, and we're going to work, and my objective for this week for that player is try to get them to enjoy the game more. The only thing I said to this player, as an example, in their golf swing is I want them to feel like they're going to push, they're going to create some pressure in the front half of their lead foot, their left foot. He's a right-hander. I want him to feel like he's pushing on the ground. And the objective there is to get the club tracking a little more from in to out to create a consistent ball flight and hit some draws. Essentially, I've taken biomechanical information, plugged it into my experience and what this player needs. This player needs to get away from technique and perfect and positions. And so we're going to go out on the golf course, and I'm just going to get him to hit slinging hooks. His only feel is pressure on the lead part of that front foot. And we're going to play games. I'm going to get him to have fun and try to get him to fall in love with the game again. To me, that's how biomechanics show up in my teaching. Do I ever use the word biomechanics or biomechanical? Never.
So the last week, inside the last 7 days, I spent the whole day on Tuesday at Lafayette College with Dr. Stephen Nesbitt and Mike Jacobs, and I spent the whole day with a student of mine at Kwan's on Friday. And Dr. Kwan keeps a good secret. So anyway, I think maybe just saying one thing I got from both of those things might give somebody an idea what golf science. I like calling it golf science. Biomechanics is some of it. Physics is some of it. So with Dr. Nesbitt, we worked on a functional definition of handle dragging. The term I sort of coined. Everybody who teaches like Andrew knows exactly what handle dragging is, but they got a lot of people out there that maybe teach it and think it's some kind of like made up thing. So we worked on a instantaneous curvature of the golf club and the radius of that, and you can see the difference between, let's say, Tiger 2013 and Tiger 2000. Okay, so that's something I picked up from a scientist that everybody references, that everybody's learned from, including Chris. Dr. Kwan, who Chris studies with, we were looking at the difference between the lead hand acceleration. That wasn't the only thing, but we were looking at the differences between the lead hand acceleration vectors of Grant Waite and my student and where they differed. And they differed a decent amount. And it wasn't because I wasn't trying to teach him the same stuff that Grant's doing. He just wasn't doing it. And you can't eyeball that. So you get measured in a place like Penn State or at a place like Texas Women's University, and you have a scientist run these things through an advanced program, and now all of a sudden the unseen becomes seen, and by the time you go out and teach the student, it may be something as simple as Andrew is working on with his student. But at the end of the day, I just don't want all of Chris's background to get lumped into biomechanics, and nor do I want everybody to think that some kind of way it's something like what people think biomechanics is. There's an awful lot of plain physics in what Dr. Kwan has taught Chris and what Dr. Kwan has done with golf, and same thing with Sasha, who Chris is real close to. Golf science is a big ball. And Chris would tell you he's learned a lot from Paul Wood, who's at Ping, who's a club guy. But there's a science to all of that, and you know, Enzo measuring what the club does. So I think it's just, I think like Nick said, evidence based. Like let's find out what's actually happening in the golf swing, or in the case of my student last week, what's actually happening in their golf swing, and then it's the teacher's job to put it in a nice little easy package that doesn't blow the student's brain. That's like exactly what Andrew said, the art of teaching.
Hey, Nick, did you have something?
Well, the way I envision the sciences in golf, I think you have physics, which is looking at club impact, geometry. A lot of the stuff that is called biomechanics is really just physics, as Brian said. And then I think you have the biomechanics is more your body's interaction with the club and with the ground. And then you have kinesiology, a whole another aspect, which is a science to itself of really how does the body safely create these forces. How do you look at physical limitations, and you bring in the golf performance oriented guys who are real body experts, and at that point you're looking more at kinesiology than physics. But the biomechanics I see is kind of bridging those two worlds of the physics of golf and the biology of golf. And so it's probably thrown around as a term a bit more than it should be, because when people are talking about physics, they'll say they're talking about biomechanics, and the general public is entirely confused as to what it means. But that's kind of, yeah, and golf coaches too.
I like what Brian said. Cordy, I like what Brian said. Golf science, and I love his example. It's a big ball, and there's a lot of stuff in that ball. Just picture it that way. Golf science. It all fits under science.
So the takeaway from this chat is that people should stop using biomechanics as the catch-all word. We're going to use golf science from now on. Yeah?
Absolutely. I without mentioning any names, some people who are supposedly really big into biomechanics, once I talked to one of the guys in the industry, big biomechanics supposedly, and I said, "Who's doing you guys math?" And he went, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, who's doing the math?" In other words, like the stuff that I learned from Dr. Nesbitt and Dr. Kwan here in the last 6 days of my life. It was, stuff that you had to have a program to take this data from, capture and make it into something, so you could see the instantaneous curvature of the hand path, or to see the lead hand accelerations. And they basically said nobody's doing it. So here were people, and I'm not, again, mentioning names, that consider themselves biomechanics people that wasn't doing what either of these two golf scientists do every single day that they study the golf swing. And hopefully, like Nick and Andrew were saying, that the golf teaching world and the golf playing world can find out that it's not like a big scary bunch of words they have to learn. It's just a common sense approach that's probably closer. The teaching of it is probably closer to what Harvey Penick, Henry Pickard, sorry, those two names get wrapped in my head. Henry Pickard gave Ben Hogan a lot of lessons and helped him a bunch. He didn't know any of this science, and I bet you if you watch those lessons, they would look a lot like a lesson from somebody like Andrew Rice. In my opinion.
All right. So let's.
Yeah, that was bad in the interview.
Let's continue on with this golf science thing. So if we're gonna, you said it's a big ball, we're gonna put a lot of things in there. What do you think of them? Like, if you're to pick just a couple most important things. So if a teacher is just getting into golf science, what are like the 2 or 3 most important things that you would recommend? Whoever wants to go.
I'll offer one up. I think the first thing that a teacher needs to understand is some impact physics. What causes the ball to fly a certain way? Let's almost start with the end product and understand that, and then back ourselves away from that and start to get a picture of, okay, what are the factors that are influencing that impact physics, and then you backtrack from there, all the way from the golf club to how the player interacts with the club, and then how the player interacts with the ground.
Cordy, once you understand that, like Andrew's saying, once you understand ball flight, there's only 2 things the golfer is connected to. They're connected to the ground, and they're connected to the club. The club has no idea whether I gripped it, Tiger or Andrew gripped it, or Ping Man gripped it. It reacts the same way. So after I learned that impact stuff, I would learn what the club inputs, the forces and torques, and the hand path, which that club is going to make when it swings to and fro. And then I would study everything Dr. Kwan and Mike Duffy and all those guys that talk a lot about the ground reaction stuff and get that right first. That would be, to me, impact, what the club experiences, and then the golfer's interaction with the ground. That would be the first three days of a perfect golf science education.
Okay. I'll make sure to get some links from you guys, and we'll throw some stuff up, some resources with this. All right, so we've got
and
this.
one thing I'll add to what Brian said, because I don't think we want to leave out the different segments and joints of the body and how they interact with each other. So I would agree most important is the golfer connected to the ground and the connection to the club through the handle, but the entire field of kinematics is still something that's pretty important in analyzing swings and looking at what someone's body is able to do through interaction within the body. So may not be.
That's day 4.
Yeah, maybe it's not the first thing that I would say is most important, but it's definitely a big factor, and especially when you answer the question of why can't I do that thing that I'm trying to do with the handle of the club. So if I can't get my hand path to move in a certain way, maybe it's something to do with my body's limitations, and you get into all the work of TPI and Greg Rose and Phil Cheatham and AMM, and a lot of their focus has been on that piece of it. And now recently we're getting a lot more attention on the interaction with the ground and the hand path stuff, which I think is great too.
Cool. How did you guys learn this stuff? Like both Andrew and Brian, like what did you guys do to go about learning these core things?
Cordy, I listen to Brian a lot. No, Brian is always, as you can tell, if you can't tell from watching this, I love listening to Brian. He's passionate about it, and he's always willing to share. I think you can't help but learn and pick up stuff from Brian when he gets all fired up. I love it. And then I like to research. I like to test stuff and go out and test stuff for myself. That's the best way to do it, because when you've done it for yourself and you've tried it and tested it and had something to help you quantify it, other than just your feel or what it looks like, you start to own it, and it's so much easier to buy into.
So like for something that you're learning, do you typically you'll go out and test it yourself? Is that typically how it goes for you?
Yeah, I love to test it. One of the things I've been testing lately on, and I use TrackMan. I've got TrackMan and Swing Catalyst, so I like to use those two. But just for example, club head speed, in just trying to feel that going normal, that, as Brian calls it, that Spider-Man type release. It's amazing how you can actually, for myself, I've always been able to get to, up until the other day, my highest speed ever on TrackMan was 106.1, ever since I've been on it. And just trying to feel like I almost threw my wrists at it a little bit, and I didn't hold on, and I really tried to let it go. I got it up to 107.5, just trying to feel that, and it was very cool to just experience that.
Brian, tell us more.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the kind words there, Andrew. Basically, I read some quotes the other day from Steve Jobs. I thought they were unbelievable. I highly recommend just Google famous quotes from Steve Jobs. I mean, obviously the guy. He was a pretty brilliant guy. And one of the things he said was, much of what innovation is just taking stuff that's already there and organizing it in a different way. And I really feel like that's, for the most part, my contribution to golf science. My contribution to golf science was I am a really good judge of teaching talent. And the people that I surrounded myself with as compadres and collaborators, like Mike Finney, John Hardesty, Michael Jacobs, Chris Como, Richard Franklin, Kevin Shields, Damon Lucas. Those guys are really smart guys. So when we set out to actually uncover this stuff, everybody's good at something else, right? Chris was in the spot in his career and that he could take a shot at getting a degree. Nobody else in the group was in that spot. Plus, he might be the book smartest guy in the group. So,
Yeah.
Michael Finney. So he was the guy that went. Michael Finney will call Barack Obama on the phone. At John Hardesty's urging, we needed to look straight to the university researchers. So it was Hardesty's idea to start calling these people, and it was Finney's gumption to call Dr. Nesbitt, and for me to call Paul Wood and organize these anti-summits that were obviously way ahead of their time, and things like Michael Jacobs with this all the research he does, probably has the most papers and the most old books and has done a lot of reading, and all these guys interacting with each other on the phone. We've sort of and in person we spent so much time on the phone, though. That was the first thing that came out of my mouth, is that what I think we've been able to do is sort of force it onto the public. At least maybe I've done that. And because there's got to be a reason why it's less than 10% of people taking golf lessons, and everybody with a clue knows what that reason is. The results just aren't there. I've said it once, I've said it a million times. This mop I got to get cut right here. I'm going to go up the street and spend $40 because on a big, ugly head like mine, as fat as I am right now, if I don't get a good haircut, I look like a clown more than I already am. So, but if this couldn't cut my hair and make me look better than I actually look because they hide the fact that I'm 900 pounds overweight, I would get a Flowbee and cut my hair myself. And that's what most golfers do. They just cut their hair themselves. They just try to figure it out on their own. And when you get some good information in the hands of some smart people like Andrew and Chris and all the other guys I mentioned and everybody else coming into the realizing that there's good information that they were not exposed to by the typical sources that have done golf education, in my crazy little opinion, it's going to make golf a better game because it's going to make golf instruction a better game, and people know, hey, look, if Tiger needs help, I just thought the funniest thing of all this, the last thing I want to say about Tiger, is all the goofy people that were saying that Tiger wasn't going to have a coach. He had a coach his entire life, and he's got another one now.
Nick, curious, you're in a different realm here. How did you learn? What's been your kind of process to figure stuff out?
Well, my knowledge level is nowhere near these other two guys that you have here. I'm a regular golfer who kind of saw through trying to take a bunch of lessons 20 years ago. At the time, I concluded that, well, golf pros, they're just not that good at this whole process of making somebody better. And then probably 10 years ago, I met a guy named Terry Rolls here in San Francisco, and I was already into movement and really detailed fitness subjects, like how somebody has developed like movement compensations and why certain postures lead to certain swing flaws, and a lot of the TPI stuff. Like right when TPI came out, I was all over reading anything that they ever put out, and I met Terry, and I realized that there are some really good golf pros out there who could be doing something that traditionally, to make a ton of money, a really smart person might be a businessman or a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist. And I think, man, there's some people teaching golf now who really should be known more. Like the public needs to know that there are some really good teachers out there. So probably a few years after working with Terry, they were just for colleges at one point, and then they opened it up. So I just started connecting with every golf teacher and everybody involved in biomechanics that I could find. And I've had communities for a while of trainers and rehab people. and then started the Golf Biomechanics group. So my learning is mainly from trying to facilitate conversations from these people who are actually on the ground doing it, coaching, and are playing themselves at a high level. I don't consider myself really one of them. My job is more to put them together and to get all these worlds combined of sport coaches, fitness people, rehab people, biomechanists, psychologists, motor learning experts. I think it's all part of that ball of science that Brian was talking about. I think for so long, golf instruction has just been really mythology, and I think Tiger picking Chris is the beginning of a huge change. Hopefully things go well. I think they will. And like Andrew said, I was never a huge Tiger guy, but I'm going to be watching every moment he's on TV, just like everybody else, and
I want
pulling
to
for
weigh
him.
in and say I was always a huge Tiger guy. So, Tiger, in case you watch this, I've been following you since you were on That's Incredible when you were 6 years old. I dig you. Pulling for you, I know you're going to win the Masters.
I'm watching on the couch like everybody else.
Absolutely, everybody's watching.
All right, so we've got golf sciences now. If you want to get started, you're going to start with impact physics. Then you're going to look at the club and the ground, and then you're also going to look into the body. And you're just going to get involved in the community, start talking to guys like Brian, go get involved with all the groups that Nick runs, start looking at the research that Andrew's doing and issues around. Anything that we missed here talking about golf sciences, or have we kind of given a primer, or at least talked about it? I don't know.
What I would say is if you go on the way that Andrew explained it, which I think is brilliant, just starting from so we have devices now that do a pretty good job of measuring the club delivery and what the ball does. They could be better, absolutely. They're perfect, no, but they're pretty damn good. TrackMan's a good product for sure. Now you go a little further back. Now you have, within the realm of money that a golf pro can spend, Enzo does a pretty darn good job of measuring the club, the rest of the swing, and a pretty good job of measuring what the body does. So the only thing that's missing there is more the kinetics, and that can be added to that type of product, like gears. It's just math. The other thing that doesn't exist right now is a force plate system that gives you the individual foot vectors and the combined vectors that Dr. Kwan has made world famous, starting out with Nick's Golf Biomechanics Forum. And there's a couple of golf pros looking for that, I can tell you. So that's going to happen. And what I'm hoping to see is that the companies that would invest and develop stuff can follow the lead of what the cutting edge of what the information that an Andrew Rice would want at his fingertips. Maybe even very portable and be able to not have to be in a building or something like that. And I think that's people have to understand. Measurement devices are not science. Every time science comes up, even on golf science forums, there's some yahoo that brings up a machine. They're not science. They're measurement devices. They can measure some of the science, and we just need more of them. Because when we have more of them, look what TrackMan did for everybody's understanding of the D-plane and the resultant path and club delivery. And shoot, I know a heel hit now from a mile away. I don't need TrackMan to tell me it was a heel hit. So I think one day you'll be able to stand on some relatively small force plates that will give you the vectors and the shear forces, and have some portable markers that will give you, alpha, beta, gamma torques and everything else, and perfect little hand path trace, and brilliant coaches like Chris and Andrew and Michael Jacobs and Michael Finney and all those guys can have products that make facilitating the science better. But at the end of the day, the teacher still has to be able to get it across to the golfer and has to get the golfer to do it. And the number one thing that I hear from people who have tried teachers who would call themselves golf science followers or whatever. You still have to be able to get that student to do it, and that is teaching. Other than that, it's lecturing.
Andrew, that example you gave earlier with the student that you were working with,
Yes.
what devices, what tech did you use with him to figure that out?
TrackMan, to start with, just showing me that essentially he's been struggling with a lack of consistency, and he gets down today and he puts up 5 swings with the driver, and all 5 swings are within 1 degree on either side of 0. So he's essentially 2 straight, and he can't hit a predictable, and I'm a big fan of predictable over optimal. He can't hit a predictable golf shot. So we started out with TrackMan. Unfortunately, my computer for my swing catalyst died last week, so I'm having that replaced. But if that hadn't died, I would have put him on swing catalyst just simply to show him something I could see quite clearly on video, that he was getting his weight in his left heel. I've had him on swing catalyst before. I know what his patterns are, just to be able to show him what I could see, but I used video anyway. And I knew that if we did get him on swing catalyst, we would see that there was some inefficiency in how he was using the ground. As Brian was talking, I think the ultimate when it comes to measurement devices would be you've got a TrackMan to tell you about club delivery and ball flight. You've got an ENSO machine to give you some information about the club and how that club worked. Gears, which a couple of the guys have got at the moment, is going to tell you a lot about how the body works. And then you've got some force plates like a swing catalyst that the player is hitting off of. The question is, the challenge, as Brian said, is as golf coaches, we get to use this technology, we get to understand it, and what that does is it helps us down the road to be able to, without those measurement devices being there, it helps us to be able to recognize certain things that we've seen and understand the pattern that goes into that, so that down the road we become better at deciding what information, how much of that information, and when we're going to share it with the student. I find measurement devices help me as a coach almost more than they help the player.
Andrew, I'd like to add to that. Again, no names, but there's been a couple of guys, on the forums. You're like, oh, you need to eyeball it. You need to eyeball it. You're not a real teacher unless you can just eyeball it. Well, let me tell that guy and who knows who he is and everybody else out there that says that. Andrew Rice can eyeball a pressure shift better because he's seen the thousands of them on swing catalyst. Brian Manzella can tell you it wasn't an inside-out path that started that ball to the right and then closed the path face that made it hook. It was a toe hit because I've seen 100,000 of them do the exact same thing on TrackMan. So for all the eyeball-only guys out there, the measurement devices help you when you go out on the golf course and don't have your devices with you. Your eyes get better trained because they had better feedback than just the sound of the thing and what it looked like.
Yeah, agreed, Brian? For sure.
So let me just throw another point in here and get your comments, and maybe we can wrap with this. But when talking with someone like Peta and Lynn or Joe Bosco, they take a lot of their players out on the course. They're working on the course, and you don't have access to this stuff then. How do you guys teach, or how do you see it shifting as you teach on the range versus on the course, and using these different things? Like you're talking about, you use the technology enough that you can eyeball it, right? Is that the goal, that you use it enough you don't have to use it, so you go out on the course and you see someone on the tee, they hit that shot, that you see what's wrong without having to be in the studio, right?
I think that gets built up over time, particularly in your history with a certain player. Cordy, you spend a lot of time with the player and you use those type of measurement devices with the player. You can get an understanding as to what their tendencies, their patterns might be. When you go out on the golf course, they're not going to change. If anything, they're going to become slightly exaggerated out on the golf course when they're hitting a shot that counts. So you can take that information and you can use that as you share little nuggets with the player and try to feel a little bit more pressure, try to feel like your weight's staying back a little longer. You don't want to be data driven, but you're going to use the data to help you share the right information with that player. I think that's how I like to use it. As Brian said, ball flight and heel hits and toe hits, and I can call that without TrackMan to a certain degree at the moment. But it just takes practice. It takes experience.
The part that I would say, first of all, there's going to be dedicated, there already is, but there's going to be a lot more dedicated performance coaches in the future. It's going to happen. They're going to just be the guys that work with practice, work with psychology, facilitate the right exercise program based on, assessing and then taking golfers on. But at the end of the day, man, the reason golf is where it is they got people out there that can't even fix their slice, for crying out loud. It's not that hard. So, to say that that's all golf instruction is taking somebody on a course and showing them shots. If you can't hit it where you're looking, Andrew's talking about predictable ball flight. I remember probably the best I ever thought I strategized in my life is when I used to hit a huge pull hook. That was my only shot. I couldn't hit another shot. So every hole I played, I was as smart as Jack Nicklaus and went, well, dog leg right. Can't start it over those trees. If I hit 2-iron, I'm going to have 3 wood left. That looks like a good idea. I'm going to hit 2-iron off the tee, knock it down the left side of the fairway. I was pretty good with my fairway woods, trying to get up and down, or get lucky and hit it on the green. So all that strategy sounds great, and I'm not taking anything away from it, because I think if I was a young guy, I'd be considering maybe performance coaching. But, man, you got to be able to hit the ball where you're looking. That's the difference between Tiger Woods in 2000 and Tiger Woods last year, is the ball didn't go where he still knows how to play golf. Make no mistake about that. When Chris gets him hitting it better, and I'm sure he will, he remembers how to win, and all this stuff about he doesn't scare anybody anymore. Yeah, he makes 3 birdies in the back 9 of the Masters. You watch.
No, so what was that? So you've got performance coaches you mentioned. What do you define yourself as, and what are some categories that you see?
Because I started this 31 years ago, I had to do everything, and I consider myself a really good short game teacher. And I think if I was 35, I might just become a putting teacher. Shoot, everybody gets the ball in the air with the putter, so you can't, I don't consider myself to be as good a short game teacher as an Andrew Rice, who focuses on it more, or 7 Weeks, who focus on it even more, right? What I'm really good at, I get somebody to hit the ball better pretty easily without changing a whole bunch of stuff. Like Dr. Kwan, I left that long upright backswing in there. I didn't have to do anything goofy with that. I left it alone. Now, maybe one day, if I worked with him over a long period of time, it would shorten itself, but that's probably the number 2 reason why people don't take golf lessons. Number 1 is their buddy didn't get any better. But number 2 is, I like my big upright backswing. Do I have to change it? Doesn't Bubba Watson have a big upright backswing? Didn't John? Yes. So obviously that's not why Quan doesn't hit it good. Quan didn't hit it good because he's a unreformed slicer. He didn't have the club under his heel pad. He didn't know how to apply any yam on the downswing, and he arm drug but arm drug his left arm like it was going out of style with not enough supination. It was a great, easy lesson to give. I wish I would have put it on like Google Hangouts like this so everybody could see, oh, shoot, golf science. It ain't that hard. I'm teaching a scientist, and I didn't use any of those terms. He knows what all of them mean, and I still didn't use any of them. It's just fixing people, and fixing people, at the end of the day, trumps teaching people how to play. But you have to do both, no doubt.
For sure.
I feel like that's a good place to end. Awesome, guys. This was fun. Thanks for hanging out. Hope people
Thanks,
liked
Cordy.
it. We'll, if people liked it, we'll do it again. If they don't, well, we'll forget about it.
This will be watched more than any of these ever get watched.
All right. I believe.
Just hashtag Tiger, hashtag Como. You'll get lots of hits.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, would you say now that Saturday was the most important day in golf instruction history now?
No, I maintain that the day that Chris Como had Grant Waite over to see Dr. Kwan, because Nick Chertok had a forum called Golf Biomechanics, and Brian Manzella called Joe Mayo and Grant Waite on the phone and got them interested in that stuff enough for Grant to come, and Chris got him interested enough for Grant to come, getting those two guys together, because Dr. Kwan, was very, very super impressive that day, and I think, we all found out what we didn't know, and Grant found out some stuff I think he knew that he thought he knew wasn't really that good. That, man, where am I going to learn more of this stuff? Who's the best person in the world to learn Dr. Kwan stuff from? Chris Como, besides Dr. Kwan. So they formed a partnership. They've been very successful, and now you got Tiger. So that's the most important day in golf instruction history, when Tiger breaks this darn record. I was right.
He's up and on the bandwagon full on.
All right. The most important day. We'll jot that down. Cool, guys. Thanks so much. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Okay,
All right, Cordy.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Andrew.
Cheers, Nick.
See you, man.
Bye.
Bye-bye.